Hi, everyone, and welcome to week 8. This week, we're exploring solution focused brief therapy, often called SFBT, a strengths based, client centered approach that works especially well in settings where time is limited and the focus is on specific, achievable goals. Even if you never use SFBT as a full model, the techniques you'll learn this week, especially goal setting, scaling, and reframing, are useful in almost every area of social work practice. Here's what we'll be covering today: an overview of SFBT and how it differs from traditional therapy, a brief video example to observe SFBT in action, a structured practice using key SFBT tools, including joining, goaling, and ending, and some language you can try out in your role plays and future field placements. SFBT was developed in the early 1980s by a married couple, Insoo Kim Berg and Steve DeShazar, at the Milwaukee Family Therapy Center. It grew out of their dissatisfaction with traditional approaches that focused on the problem and its origin, that often reinforced a sense of client helplessness. SFBT was designed to flip that script. It's brief, usually around 4 to 8 sessions. It's present and future focused. It's goal oriented. And it's deeply respectful of client expertise. Clients are viewed in SFBT as the experts of their own lives. The job of the social worker is to ask carefully crafted questions that help the client identify what's working, amplify their own solutions, and envision what life will look like when the problem isn't a problem anymore. Let's unpack a few of the underlying core beliefs in SFBT. First, the belief is that clients have strengths and resources that they can draw on. Another core assumption is that small changes can lead to big shifts. Next, the client defines the goal, not the social worker. Another element of SFBT says if something is working, do more of it. And if something isn't working, stop doing that and do something else. Here's a clinical tip. When using SFBT, we're not ignoring problems. We're just choosing to put more of our attention on what's already going well, even in small ways, and building from there. This approach can be especially powerful for clients who feel overwhelmed or stuck. Instead of digging into the problem, we help them shift their gaze toward possibility. SFBT sessions follow a loose but reliable structure. In socializing and joining, the therapist builds rapport and a collaborative tone. In describing the problem, the, the therapist gathers information to learn about the problem only enough to understand what specific change is desired by the client. In goaling, the therapist asks the client what would be different if the problem improved. In scaling, the therapist and the client measure progress or hope on a scale from 0 to 10. And in ending, the therapist summarizes strengths, highlights progress, and identifies next steps. This structure keeps the session focused and forward moving, even when the topics are heavy. You'll be watching a brief demonstration of an SFBT session. As you watch, listen for how the practitioner joins with the client without dwelling on the problem. The kinds of questions they ask, especially the what's different or what else questions. Note also how the session ends on a note of strength or direction. In SFBT, joining isn't just about rapport, it's about establishing a collaborative partnership. You might begin with something like, "Thanks for coming in today. Before we jump in, would you like to start by telling me a bit about what you'd like to be different?" We avoid language like what's wrong or what's the problem. Instead, we shift toward possibility. That subtle change in language helps clients feel less pathologized and more empowered. Here's a clinical tip. When the client starts talking about the problem, your job isn't to analyze it, it's to look for signs of strength, exceptions, and hope. For example, you might ask, when the issue isn't this intense, what's different about those times? Or, tell me about a time recently when things went slightly better. What was happening then? This is one of the most important parts of the SFBT process. We ask questions that help the client imagine what life would look like if things were even a little bit better. Examples include things like, what would be different if this problem improved just a small amount? If you woke up tomorrow and things were better, what would be the first small sign of change? What will you be doing differently when things begin to shift? This language helps clients name the goal in their own terms, which increases their buy in and motivation. SFBT sessions often end by summarizing progress, reflecting strengths, and identifying next steps. You might say something like, it sounds like you've already taken some small steps that are moving things in the direction you want. Or, you mentioned that on the days you journal, you feel calmer. What would it look like to build on that this week? Ending with encouragement, clarity, and next steps sends clients out feeling capable, not overwhelmed. As you work through this week's material, I encourage you to experiment with this way of thinking. The goal isn't to master SFBT in a week, but to listen for the shift in tone. Notice the focus on hope, the trust in the client's capacity. As always, please take your time with the module content. Bring your reflections to your journal and post in the Q&A forum as questions come up. Thanks for your presence this week. I look forward to seeing you again next time.